Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar on a very happy Thursday. Thank you for being patient for the 1 minute little bit delay to get started because, as y'all know, I love to catch up with all of our speakers right before their presentation, even when it is my boss and mentor, Dr. Ray Foxworth, who I am so excited to have on the webinar series today. Thank you, Doc, for being on the webinar.
Absolutely. And don't fool anyone. I'm not the boss. Really, Christy is.
Hey, Stephen. Y'all just don't even know. Yesterday on a phone call with him, I told him that there are days when I pinch myself because I can't believe I get paid to have this much fun. And it is no joke. You guys are such a joy to work with, and the work that I get to do on a day-to-day. I mean, seriously, I can't believe I get paid for this. But for those of you who are not familiar with Dr. Ray Foxworth, he is the president and founder of ChiroHealthUSA, second generation chiropractor. I just absolutely adore his parents, actually his whole family. Amazing family. He was in practice for over 35 years in a multidisciplinary spine center, worked in the VA. It's like the first staff chiropractor in the VA here in Mississippi. He is the past chair of the Chiropractic Summit, serves for Cleveland Chiropractic on one of their boards. He's also on the board for the Foundation for Chiropractic Progress, as well as the Chiropractic Future Strategic Plan. So if y'all think we just don't find stuff to keep him busy, let me just tell you, we have all the help in the world because he loves to give back and get involved in the profession. However, his first passion outside of patient care was helping his fellow chiropractors in this profession learn about the rules and regulations that govern what you can and can't do. Because just like you, he was in a very busy practice serving his patients. And even as a second generation chiropractor, nobody told him what those rules and regs were. And he's going to tell you the story about how he learned that and how he shares this story to help chiropractors just like you. So, Doc, let me pull up your PowerPoint and let you take it away.
Thank you so much, Christy. How long has it been since we've done a webinar together?
It's been a couple of years.
Yeah, been a minute. Yeah. Okay. Well, let me know how the reviews go, and we might do another one. So did you get any response on the polls that you put up as of yet?
It did. Deleted my poll.
Not
so are you?
That's fine.
I'm popping it up now.
So the reason that we decided to do this particular webinar is I recently had the opportunity to present to Dr. Mark Student and his group, who's very involved in personal injury, workers' comp, things of that nature. And I had 15 minutes to explain to them some of the challenges that we have in our practices, and particularly when it pertains to our fees. And just to kind of give you let's see where my advance is here, Christy. There we go. Next. Since we are going to be talking about fees, I have to keep the attorneys happy, and you can read all of that's on the screen, but basically it says wherever two or more shall gather, thou shalt not talk about fees. So we are going to talk about fee schedules and fee systems, but anything that we mention in the way of examples of charges and things like that are strictly for instructional purposes only. So I did not wake up 15 years ago and decide that, geez, I want to start a company called ChiroHealthUSA and be involved in compliance and end up with quite frankly, over 1.2, 1.3 million patients that are part of ChiroHealthUSA and probably close to 7,000, 8,000 providers. When Christy said, I learned some things along the way, this was a painful lesson that I learned, but in retrospect, I'm glad I did. So my story is a story about one of my favorite patients at that time, Ms. Jones. Ms. Jones was a cash patient. I was taking care of her husband, her couple of kids. Life is good. Everybody's happy. They're coming in at that particular time, and I'm charging probably $35 or $40 an office visit. And then, as often happens, and I'll guarantee you, many of you have experienced this yourself, you've got a patient who's cash, no insurance at all, And so you kind of bend over backwards to help them by giving them a discount, which is, you're a nice guy for doing that, nice gal for doing that. But she was involved in an auto accident. And I did what every chiropractor, most any doctor does. Instead of billing the 35 or 45, which was a significant discount from my normal rates, I billed out my actual rates to the insurance company, and they were probably in the neighborhood of $90, $95. So a few weeks later, Ms. Jones comes back in, and I walk into the room. She's got these papers in her hand, and she's sitting there with her family. And one of my staff members is always with me, taking care of my notes for me. And I could just tell something was wrong. And I said, Ms. Jones, it looks like you're upset. What's wrong? And she gets up, walks over to me. She said, Doc, I know what you charged me and my family for a visit, and I saw what you charged to the insurance company. And it's guys like you that rip off insurance companies that keep me and my family from affording health care. Let that sink in for a minute. And I said, no, Miss Jones, I said, I did make a horrible mistake. I never let you know what my actual fees were, or that I was trying to help you and your family because you don't have insurance. She said, well, I don't care. I've reported you to the Board of Examiners, and, oh, by the way, to the State Attorney General. So with that having happened, it made me begin to wonder. Let me back up a moment. The good news is we didn't have a law in our state at that time that you couldn't charge more to insurance than you did to private pay or cash patients. But here's the bigger picture that I really want you to understand. Even though I was trying to help this lady and her family, there is no way that looks good or right in the eyes of a patient for us to be billing out $85, $90, or $100 if they're involved in an auto accident or a comp, and we're charging them 35 or 40 or 50. So the big takeaway is doctors always let your patients, if you are offering discounts, let them know what your actual fees are, establish the real value of what you're doing. I didn't get any fines or penalties, but it really was an eye opener for me that perception was in one of my favorite patients. So be careful how you're setting up your fees and your financial policies, and understand that if you don't do it right or you don't explain it right, it can absolutely cause you some problems. Here's the other thing that made me start thinking. Why is it okay for Blue Cross, Aetna, and Cigna to all pay me a different fee for the exact same service, and that's not illegal? Well, for those of you that know anything about compliance and the way your office runs and your contracts, the reason you can do that, and it's not considered a dual fee schedule or multiple fee schedules, is you have a contractual network discount. And so while you may charge everybody the same, depending on who the payer is, that doesn't mean everyone always pays the same. That's a critical point that I want you to remember as we go on through this. So this is what made me start looking into, why is it okay for those companies to do that? Why can't we do that? And what I found was there is a way to do that. And it is through the contractual network discount. And that's what ChiroHealthUSA is. We are a network of providers that work in conjunction with a discount medical plan organization. Why is that important? Write down that acronym, DMPO. That's going to be your new best friend. The reason that it's important is because the discount medical plan organization model is regulated by the Department of Insurance in most states. So just like Blue Cross, Aetna, and Cigna are regulated by the Department of Insurance, so is ChiroHealthUSA. So when we have a contractual network discount for the patients and we're offering them discounts, it is now completely legal and compliant. So if you don't have something like a DMPO in place, here are the 5 most dangerous things that you are absolutely going to run into. Dual fee schedules. What is that? That is exactly what I just described to you. That is charging more to insurance than you do to your cash patients. Why is it a problem? It misstates your actual charges to the insurance companies if they submit that. It's also a potential False Claims Act violation. Improper time of service discounts. What are those? Doctors, if you are charging or if you are discounting more than about 5 to 15%, let's say you're given a 25 or a 30% discount, which, just so you know, most doctors that we work with are giving 30 to 50% discounts on their new patient visits and their routine follow-ups. So if you're discounting anything over that 5 to 15% range, it could be considered an improper time of service discount. And really, it's just a cover for a dual fee schedule. You're calling it time of service or a prompt payment discount. But here's what you got to understand. Your time of service discount or prompt payment discount must be tied to your actual cost of doing your billing. How much is the actual cost of doing billing? Nationwide, it's in that 5 to 7, 7 to 10, maybe in worst case scenario, up to 15%. So don't just say, well, I get to do a time of service discount, so I don't have to worry about that. It has to be defensible. That's the key takeaway with that one. What's an inducement violation? Well, I've seen Medicare patients in the past before I learned all of this. And by the way, I am a recovering medical compliance officer. It's a tough life. But when I found this out, it was like, oh my gosh, I've seen Medicare patients for years, and I didn't charge them my regular fees for the exams. Sometimes didn't charge for it at all. They don't pay for X-rays or therapy, and sometimes I would give those away. Well, I'm a nice guy. But in the eyes of the OIG, Office of Inspector General, and now even in the state insurance departments, that's considered an inducement. They say the OIG says you can give incentives or discounts or free things for an amount up to $15, maybe $75 annually. If you violate that, so if my exam is normally $100 and I only charge $50 to my Medicare patient, that's an inducement violation because I've given away more than $15 in that particular transaction. And what are the penalties for that? Up to $10,000, $50,000 per wrongful act. So you see where, if you're seeing a bunch of Medicare patients or even a few, Medicare doesn't pay for the exam, but yet they can fine you for discounting your exam or other non-covered services. So be careful about offering free or discounted exams, x-rays, or therapies. The next thing is an anti-kickback statute. What does that say? Well, it prohibits paying or receiving money or remuneration in order to induce the referral of government-paid healthcare businesses. And it's no longer just government-paid healthcare businesses. These laws also apply to Blue Cross, Aetna, Cigna, and all the other payers. The anti-kickback statute is a criminal law, and each fine can be up to $100,000 and 10 years in prison. Now, I'm not trying to scare you with this, but if you're like I was years ago, you really didn't understand all of this and how it impacts the way that you operate your practice and the way you set up your financial policies. Penalties for kickbacks include $100,000 per kickback plus 3 times the amount of the remuneration. Bottom line is hefty fines and penalties that can often be career-ending. What's a False Claim Act? Civil penalties for submitting false claims include up to 5 years in prison, criminal fines of $25,000. What's a false claim? So I'm going to tell on a doctor I know who saw a lot of Medicare patients. He was not a chiropractor. And when it came to dealing with his Medicare patients, he charged them all or billed out the exact same code, a 99202, which is a very low-level code. And why did he do that? Because he said he didn't want to take a chance of being audited by Medicare. Well, guess what he did? Because his profile with Medicare is every patient received the exact same service, that's considered downcoding, and that is a violation of the False Claims Act. Upcoding, where do we run into that? If you're seeing a cash patient like I saw Ms. Jones, and I say, well, if I want her fee to be lower, I'll just use a lower code. And if I see an insurance patient, I'll use a higher code. That's a false claim issue because CPT guidelines say that you're supposed to use the code that most accurately describes the service that was rendered. And so if you're rendering a 99203 or 99204 code for your exam, but you're trying to work the system and you just charge a lower code to your cash paying or underinsured patients, again, you have great intentions, but poor execution. It absolutely is a false claims violation. So we got to understand the rules. And, I can remember early on in practice, like, well, it's my practice. I'll do what I want. Nobody can tell me how to set my fees and what I charge. Well, as the saying goes, wrong, bucko. There are people that care about what we charge and have a significant impact on what we charge. Why do the payers care? Because there's $330 billion in healthcare expenditures, and they're estimating about $99 billion, about 3% of the spending is considered fraudulent. So they're absolutely looking at everything you do. That's what utilization review is all about. That's what pre-certification is all about. The Office of Inspector General absolutely cares about your fees and your policies. And why do they care so much when it comes to the chiropractic community? Well, back in 2005, 67% of our claims were deemed to be fraudulent. And back in 2008, the OIG proclaimed that for every $17 for every $1 they invested in RAC audits and probe audits, and a sidebar, I don't know who the heck came up with those names for audits, but none of them sound pleasant. But for every dollar they put into investigations, they got $17 back. That's a heck of a return on investment. Well, fast forward, the OIG's done a good job in educating healthcare providers about the rules and regulations. And so as you look over time, down to 2022, now they're only recouping $3 for every dollar invested because doctors are beginning to understand more about the rules and regulations. Now, let me ask you this. If you found a slot machine that every time you put in $3, you got $3 back, how many times would you do that deal? And that's why, despite the fact that more and more doctors are becoming more compliant, it is still a huge moneymaker for the OIG, and they are still recouping millions and millions, if not billions of dollars related to healthcare fraud. If you don't think that they look at chiropractic, the good Dr. Brown, he happens to be in Iowa, God bless his soul. He's doing what most all of us probably did at one point or another. I certainly did at one point. He wasn't charging for muscle stem. The thought was being, well, I don't charge any of my patients for ICE, or I don't charge my Medicare patients for muscle stem. It's a non-covered service. What do they care? Doctors, the non-covered service, when you give that away, that is the inducement. That is the false claim. And that's why they care. And they find this particular doctor for no other reason than the fact that he was giving away muscle stem and he had a $79,000 fine. I'll guarantee you he didn't get paid $79,000 for muscle stem or for the services he rendered to those Medicare patients. But when you look at the way they compound fines and penalties, that's how they can end up fining them over a service that might actually cost maybe 10 or 15 bucks. A sip of water here. Who else cares? State boards of examiners. This may come as a surprise to you, but I've sat in on a number of state board of examiners meetings, and I've been involved with the regulatory side of the profession for quite some time. And do you know that one of the top complaints to your boards of examiners is not over your clinical care, but your financial policies? It's way up there. Same thing applies to malpractice, frivolous lawsuits. We have it on good input from some of the major malpractice carriers that one of the primary causes of frivolous lawsuits is not over your clinical care, but over a dispute over billing and fees and refunds. So be very careful and understand that those entities absolutely look at your fees. The courts care. This one is specific to chiropractic. Kennedy was a chiropractor, was taking care of a Cigna patient, billed out to Cigna his services. I don't think he was in network, and so he wasn't collecting their full deductible or copay. Well, Cigna sued the chiropractor, took him to court, and the court said basically that if you do not collect the patient's portion, whether it's copay, deductible, or coinsurance, you literally have relieved the insurance company of the responsibility of paying the bill. Why? Even if you're out of network, you got to understand that the network rules still apply. They may not apply directly to you, but that patient has a contractual agreement with the insurance company that requires them to pay their full deductible and full copays. And so you got to make sure that you're collecting those. Don't think that out of network, gives you a free pass. Same thing happened in the dental community, just so you know, they aren't just picking on us, but I love what the court said. The courts, this particular dentist was billing out $100, let's say, to the dental insurance, but he only required the patient to pay, less than their 20% or less than their copay. And basically the court said that he lied to payers when he submitted a charge of $100 and only intended to collect $80 from the patient and waive the patient responsibility. You got to be very careful with that. This just happened this week. We have a doctor who's been with us for about 15 years, part of ChiroHealthUSA. He was involved in a personal injury case. It's going to court, and so he is having to answer deposition questions. Keep in mind that if you're billing a higher rate to personal injury or workers' comp and a lower rate to your cash patients, you have got to be careful because it is against the law in many states. And the most important part is you will be asked in a deposition in court about your billing practices. This is the actual question that was asked. Please outline the billing practices regarding patients without insurance, as well as patients with insurance, and all documents reflecting differences in billing practices with regard to litigation patients versus non-litigation. You know what they're really asking? They're asking, do you charge more to insurance than you do to private pay? And if they do, they are going to hammer this doctor on the stand about him falsifying his actual charges. Because if they look at what's charging to all the other patients, even though those patients aren't involved in this case, they use that as a basis to say that he has inflated his charges to the insurance carrier. And I'm going to show you, you'll find out during the course of this webinar, how to just make that go away, like we were able to help this doctor. So whose rules do you follow? Number one, I think a good starting point would be, well, who all's rules do we fall under? And many of our doctors don't know this. First of all, we have our board of examiners. We have our managed care and PPO agreements. We have the State Department of Insurance, State Attorney General's Office, State Anti-Kickback and Star Clause, Federal Anti-Kickback and Star Clause, Medicare, and then the Mac Daddy of them all, as they say, is the Federal Office of the Inspector General. That's a lot of rules and regulations. And here's the frustrating part, doctors. Because I have studied medical compliance and I have been certified in that in the past, it will blow your mind how often the rules and regulations from the Board of Examiners, your managed care agreements, and these other entities conflict. They're in direct conflict. And I'll give you just one prime example. In the state of North Carolina, I believe it is, they say that a doctor can offer a 30% discount. Well, we just talked about earlier that if you're offering more than a 5 to 15% and it's not defensible, that is, that's a problem. That is a dual fee schedule. And so you got to understand that while these rules and regulations are conflicting, we're still expected to follow them. And I'm going to go ahead and do the big reveal. If you're using that acronym I told you earlier, the Discount Medical Plan Organization, all of that, pardon my Southern French, all of that crap goes away because you're now using the contractual network discount, which is exactly how Blue Cross, Aetna, and Cigna are able to legally pay us less for the exact same service. So as you probably know, audits are on the rise. We actually did a survey of many of our consultants a year or so ago, and they fed back to us what the average fines and penalties were for doctors that were violating the rules and regulations. And as you can see, 79% of those fines could be between $25,000 and $500,000. Certainly the bulk of them in that $50,000 to $100,000, $100,000, $150,000 range. But I'm going to ask you, honestly, docs, there's times in my life and in my practice where if I'd had to stroke a $50,000 or $100,000 check, I'm done. It would have been a career ending for me. And so we have to understand that, the fines and penalties that we incur, like the good Dr. Brown in Iowa, an $80,000 fine, quite frankly, could put a lot of us in a serious problem. So how do the insurance companies, since we know audits are on the rise, how do we know what they're looking at to decide who they're going to audit? Let me show you how simple it is. Every one of you have received a letter like this in your office. It is a letter from an insurance company stating that they are doing utilization or a retrospective review of the services for a patient on a particular claim. And they'll ask you things like, or they'll ask you to submit the patient's complete chart, including daily notes by the doctor, medical and social history, daily treatment and progress notes. So those first 4 items certainly make sense if you're doing utilization review and trying to determine if the care is medically necessary. But look at the next one. Patient financial records. What do patient financial records have to do with medical necessity? Not a damn thing. They are on a fishing expedition, and let me show you what the next page asks. They specifically ask, do you offer your patients any discounts or special offers? If yes, how are the discounts or offers reflected on the claim submitted for reimbursement? Now, I've been a student of the CMS 1500 form, or whatever they're calling it these days, used to be the HICFA form. And I'm going to ask you rhetorically, which block on that claim form are you supposed to reflect that you offered a discount or special offer? Guess what? There isn't one. So if you're giving special discounts and offers and it's not reflected on the claim form, that's how it becomes a false claim. Look at the next question. Do you currently accept insurance as payment in full, meaning do you waive copays, insurance, or applicable deductibles for your patients? Now, keep in mind, these letters come into your office routinely. And if you've got your front desk or insurance CA up front, and quite frankly, they're the ones that usually fill out our forms to submit information. And I'm going to challenge you, doctors, you need to start reading your mail to see what's being asked. If they're filling this out, are they thinking about this one patient, or are they thinking about, well, you know, doc does waive the copay for Ms. Jones. She's been under his care for 25 years now. And so he still charges her, you know, that lower rate from way back when, or he knows that Ms. So-and-so is, you know, a single mom with 2 kids and he doesn't collect her deductible or her copays. If they put yes to either one of those questions, let me tell you what it leads to. If you answer yes to question 5, it's a False Claims Act violation, an inducement violation, and an anti-kickback violation. So when that doctor got fined that $80,000, it wasn't just because of what he was, you know, of the dollar amount of the muscle stem. He was actually violating these 3 sections of the OIG's rules and regulations. And you can see how $150,000, $177,000 ends up being a fine over not charging for a muscle stem. If you answer yes to question 6, it's a violation of your provider agreement because you are supposed to collect your deductibles and copays. Only in exceptional circumstances, when a patient has a documented financial hardship, can you waive those deductibles and copayments. And just for the record, you cannot say that all cash patients have a financial hardship. You cannot say that all Medicare patients or all Medicaid patients have a financial hardship. That is not my opinion. That is straight from the OIG's office, that you cannot categorically say any group has a financial hardship. It must be determined on a case-by-case basis. So you add those 2 up for answering those 2 questions the wrong way, and you got a nice, sweet $229,000 fine. Probably going to have to dig in your mattress to come up with that. What's the right way to answer those questions? Well, if you're using the discount medical plan model, it is real simple. It's the same response that we gave to the doctor that was in that deposition. And if you're using that model, it is rock solid. You'd answer it by saying the only time we offer a discount is when it's required by mandate or a contractual agreement or a documented hardship. So after many years in practice, this is the policy I came up with. And if you're having to change your policy and inform patients, what I recommend you do is what every great American should do. When you got to make major changes, blame it on the government. So our policy, and you can get a free copy of this. We'll have Christy send it out to you, or it may be in the material she's already provided. But the policy is really simple. And it blames the entities that we're having to follow their rules with. It says, in an effort to maintain compliance with various state and federal regulations, managed care and preferred provider agreements, as well as billing and coding guidelines, we've adopted the following financial policies. We have a single fee that applies to all patients for each service rendered. You may be entitled to a network or contractual discount under the following circumstances. we're a participating provider in your health plan. Think Blue Cross, Blue Shield, Aetna. If it's a state or federal program with a mandated fee schedule, think Medicare, Medicaid. In many states, PI and workers' comp have a mandated fee schedule. If you're a member of a discount medical plan organization that we may join, patients who are uninsured or underinsured, meaning limited benefits for care, may join in our office and will be entitled to network discounts similar to our insured patients. Membership is $49 a year and covers you and your dependents. Ask staff for more information. The other way you can get a discount is if you're eligible, I can say that, and choose a payment plan that allows for prompt payment discounts. And again, the prompt payment's got to be in line with your actual bookkeeping cost. And then patients who meet the financial hardship policy. And again, you can write your own financial hardship policy. If you need some assistance with that, feel free and call on our team members. And you put in the date that it becomes effective. There you go. Christy's already figured out a way for you to get that. You can use your phone and download that, or I'm sure she can upload it to the files that you might be able to access later. Or send us an email to info@ChiroHealthUSA. We'll be glad to send that to you in a Word format. So you got to know the rules, and you got to know how to solve the problem. And the best way to do that is to do what Dr. Larry Markson said many, many years ago. My fee is my fee is my fee. He didn't like the idea of doctors discounting, but the reality is, let's face it, hospitals discount, MRI centers discount, we discount. It's not a matter of it's not a matter of if you discount, but how you do it, which becomes important. And so I want you to understand this concept. You have one fee in your office. You do not have a PI fee, a workers' comp fee, an insurance fee, a cash fee, a mother, father, sister, brother fee, buy 10 visits, get one free fee. You got one fee. Now, does that mean everybody ends up paying the same fee? No, because if you got contractual network discounts, you got a mandated fee schedule, you've got, those other bullet points that we just hit, you are charging everyone the same thing, but what you actually collect may be different based on your contracts and your agreements. So how do you determine what those fees should be? A lot of doctors use a dartboard, or they'll call up their friends, and the reality is you shouldn't be calling your friends and asking them what they're charging, because that could be perceived as a violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act. Remember whether two or more shall gather, thou shalt not talk about fees. That's why. We know that fees can vary. As I said earlier, Blue Cross, Aetna, and Cigna can all pay us a different fee for the exact same service. It's not illegal. You can do that because you got a contractual network discount. So I want you to think of your fees as part of a fee system. And then we use this little rainbow to kind of help demonstrate that. In the outer band, you've got your initial visits. And if you do an exam, x-rays, and therapy and an adjustment, it might come up to $350 in actual charges. Your routine visits, again, an adjustment, a couple of therapies, maybe $185. But if they're part of Blue Cross, which is a contracted fee schedule, like we mentioned earlier, they may only allow $220. And on a routine visit, they may only allow $95. Well, Medicare only covers, the adjustments, so they're their allowables. But do you see how their actual fees, that is the doctor's actual fee, and depending on the contracts he has in place and the patients that he sees all the way down to the poverty level, that doesn't mean everybody pays exactly the same. So when we expand this and look at this, let's say that first visit, and I'm going to go down the initial visit column. Let's say that first visit comes out to $350. Well, if you're, like we said with Blue Cross, they may allow $220. But if you're part of the discount medical plan, here are the options that you have for those patients. You could have a capped fee of $150 or a 20% discount, or quite frankly, a 25% discount. And you may be thinking, well, that's above what you said earlier of that 5 to 15%. Well, the reason it can be above that is because you have a contractual network agreement, which is regulated by the Department of Insurance, just like your Blue Cross, Aetnas, and Cignas. Same thing with your Medicare patients. If the patient is part of the discount medical plan, you can have your actual fees for modalities, which may be $20 or $25, or your exams could be $50 or $75. But if they're part of the DMPO is for non-covered services, and that's what would allow you to charge maybe $10 for modalities, or $5 for modalities, or $25 for an exam, or $10 for a film. So the idea is it gives you that flexibility to be able to offer those discounts and make all of the concerns about any kickback, inducement, dual fee schedule, improper time of service discount, all of that goes away because they're now under a contract. And to be clear, patients that truly meet a financial hardship policy, and it's documented, they don't even have to join a discount medical plan. They are the one exception where you can offer those discounts because it is based on their specific financial policy or their specific financial situation. So when we look at, offering a 25 or 30 or 40 or 50% discount, because we've dealt with so many providers and we do know what their fees are, we won't share those with you, but I can tell you that it's not uncommon to see a routine office visit, if it's insurance or workers' comp or PI, to be around that $300, $350, if not more, and they're charging about half of that to their cash and underinsured patients, which is, as we've outlined previously, that is a huge problem. I've done this long enough that whenever I talk to doctors, it's like, well, everybody's doing it. It's pretty routine. I don't know anybody that's gotten in trouble. And here's my response. Doctors, if you got audited and fined and got penalties, would you post it on Facebook? Would you send out an email to all of your colleagues saying, man, I just got popped by Aetna and I've got a $100,000 fine? Of course you would not. Though I have seen one incident where someone did post that on Facebook. I don't understand that, but they did. The reality is doing all of those things are commonplace, but that does not mean that they're legal or compliant. And it is never a problem right up until the moment that it is a problem. And it becomes a problem when someone answers a questionnaire like I shared with you earlier, and it raises the flag. When you answer yes to those questions, that yes, you waive a deductible or a copay or you do special offers, you are basically raising your hand like they used to do on Let's Make a Deal, and you're screaming, pick me for an audit. If you answer that question the way we recommend, that the only time you offer discount is when it's by contractual agreement, you've taken your hand down and they figure out, wow, that doc knows what they're doing. They're not playing funny with their fees, and they go on to the one that's raising their hand. Christy, my vocal cords apparently haven't been trained recently. I'm losing my voice a little bit. So what are the benefits of the discount medical plan? As I said earlier, like with North Carolina, even if your state says you can discount, you got to be mindful of the federal regulations and inducements and fair market value in your provider agreements. And here's the challenge, Doc. Our board of examiners are made up of us, of the chiropractors. And God bless them for their service, to the profession and for trying to protect the public. But honestly, how many of them understand the breadth and depth of all of these regulations from all of those entities that I listed? So even though your board says it may be okay, that may be one checkbox that says you can do it. But if it doesn't pass muster with those other levels of regulations, you still have a problem. And here's the kicker. If you join a discount medical plan, none of this matters because the discount medical plan becomes just another allowed fee within your fee system. The other benefits of joining the discount medical plan is, when you get an insurance agreement from a Blue Cross, they tell you what they're going to pay you. With a discount medical plan, we don't set your fees. There's no cost for the doctor to join. And if you find it doesn't work for your practice, there's a 30-day opt-out clause. So there's no chance of us, quote, selling your contract to a Blue Cross, Aetna, Cigna, or a State Farm. Here's the most important part, though. When I started this company, it was primarily to deal with the issue of that dual fee situation that I had and being reported. But here's what we've learned along the way. ChiroHealthUSA is much like a Swiss Army knife. It absolutely helps solve the compliance issues. But here's the things that we didn't anticipate that it would help with. Shopper calls. Every one of your practices gets shopper calls. How are we on time, Christy? Good. Mm-hmm. So go up to your front desk, stand behind your front desk, listen to them when they answer the phone, and they get that dreaded question. How much is the first visit? Now, I'm sure you have all trained your staff to do what I call the chiropractic two-step. Don't answer the question. We dance around it. Well, Miss Jones, I'll be happy. There is no set fee for the first visit. I'll be happy to schedule you for a complimentary consultation, and the doctor go over the fees with you at that time. How many do that? If I could see your hands raised, probably most everybody. And so what does the patient do? It's like, well, damn, they didn't answer my question. And they may even go ahead and schedule an appointment, but look at your no-show rate. You know why the no-show rate is important? Because those are people that didn't get their question answered. They got the chiropractic two-step and they went on and called another clinic. And if you're not monitoring, just a side little practice management thing, if you're not monitoring the number of new patient calls that are called, let me try that again. Let me rewind. If you aren't monitoring the number of calls from new patients, and then more importantly, the number that actually show up, you're missing the boat. It could be poor execution by a staff member, poor scripting. It could be a number of things. Shopper calls want to know how much it costs. That's not an unreasonable request. But in our mind, we have our PI, our workers' comp, our mother, father, sister, brother fee, and we can't answer the question because we don't know who's paying the bill. When you're using the discount medical plan, here's how you answer that. Ms. Jones, there really is no set fee, and it does depend on what the doctor finds necessary. But it could also depend on what your insurance company requires. Why is that question important? Because it allows you to find out whether the patient has health insurance or not. And if they say, well, I have Blue Cross, say, well, Ms. Jones, Blue Cross does have a couple of different plans. If you're part of the state employee plan, y'all have an X deductible and an X copay. You can actually answer their question, which increases the likelihood that they'll come in. But because we don't know the payer source, we don't want to answer that question. And if the patient says, well, I don't have health insurance, how do you tell them what the fee is going to be? Well, if you're using the discount medical plan and you have a capped fee of $150 for the first visit and say a capped fee of, $80 or $50 or $30, whatever you want to charge for your routine visits, now you can say, well, Ms. Jones, there is no set fee for the first visit. It does depend on what the doctor finds necessary. But we're part of a discount medical plan. And so no matter what the doctor does today, the most your first visit will be is $150 and your follow-up visits will be $55. Do you prefer mornings or afternoons? You answered the question. You gave them clarity. You didn't misstate your fees. You've told them that if they were part of the network, that they can actually join in the office. They know what their fees are. And you've just increased the likelihood of it turning from a no-show into they show up and they're a paying patient. Make sense? One of the other challenges that we found that it faced, that we have some latitude in the discount medical plan, is everybody likes to take care of families. I know I did in my practice, but if your visits are $55 or $65 a visit, and you're taking care of mother, father, sister, mother, father's kids, that can get expensive. How would you like to be able to say, well, for family members, the first member pays $55, the next one's $35, the next one's $25. Believe it or not, when you have that availability and they know that it's affordable for their family to come in, guess what they do? They bring their family in. We've actually done surveys of our providers in the network, and they tell us, it's like, they say, we know this isn't insurance, but when people see that their family members are covered and it's more affordable for the second, third, and fourth family member, it's like, well, heck yeah, I'm going to bring them in. I know that doesn't make any sense up here, but it is the perception of the patients that are part of the plan. Here's the other thing. I did this for years. I used to think, well, I'd like to charge $100 a visit, but my cash patients and Medicare patients probably can't afford that, so I'm going to charge $45 or $50. Well, if I'm doing that and I set my fees and I try to split the difference between the 100 and the 50, and I set my fee at 75, the reality is every time I see an insured patient, if my fee is 75, but insurance would have allowed 100 or 150, I'm leaving that revenue on the table. So I'm not telling you to raise your fees, but what I am telling you is to look at your fees, find out who the best payer is in your area. And I'm going to ask the question, shouldn't you be paid at least what they think you're worth? And you do with that what you will. And you no longer have to worry about, well, what about my patients that are cash or underinsured or don't have benefits? Now you have a way to take care of them and it not be considered a dual fee schedule because you're using the contractual network discount. Okay, how many of you get these calls? Patient calls in and says, I'd like to see the doctor. Is he in the ABCD network? And you say, well, no, he's not part of that network. And the next thing you hear is click, because if you're out of network, you're out of luck. Well, that's not the case. It's all about the conversation. A better conversation to have is, Ms. Jones, no, he is not part of that network because of the limits they place on the care that you might need. And you follow that up with, we have a lot of patients that have insurance, but we're not in their network. That's why we belong to ChiroHealthUSA. That's a network you can join in our office for $49. And no matter what the doctor does, the first visit's $150, the follow-ups are $55. And you ask the patient, by the way, what is your copayment? And oftentimes you'll find this, well, I've got a $65 copay. And when you explain to them that your capped fee could be $45 or $55 or whatever you're charging, guess what they don't care about anymore? They don't care if they have insurance or not, because whether they're using insurance or not, the care is still more affordable if they're part of the discount medical plan. And then the last one I'll leave you with on the benefits is, how many of you have patients who have deductibles that are $2,000, $3,000, $5,000? We're seeing $10,000 deductibles. You know what that's called? That's called phantom benefits. They really don't have any benefits, because the likelihood of them hitting a $10,000 deductible in my office is slim and none. I mean, hopefully over the lifetime it may be, but the reality is they have insurance, but they have no coverage. So how do you deal with that? When you're doing the financial report of findings, and please everybody shake your head, yes, we do a formal financial report of findings. I know you don't, but you should be. You have the conversation like this. Ms. Jones, we verified your insurance. You have a $5,000 deductible. The likelihood of you meeting that is pretty close to slim and none in our office. That's why we're part of a discount medical plan. That's a network that you can join. You can actually opt out of filing your health insurance. You can join ChiroHealthUSA, and instead of having the $5,000 deductibles, your first visit is $150. The follow-up visits are $55 or $65 or whatever fees you set, doctor. And let me be real clear about this. Even if you are in network with a Blue Cross, Aetna, and Cigna, and you have a patient that wants to opt out, word on the street is, oh, they can't opt out. They have to use their insurance. That is not true. Under the HIPAA high-tech, under HIPAA, the high-tech section, it clearly states that a patient has the right to opt out of filing their insurance. Now, doctor, you can't opt out of filing their insurance, but the patient can opt out of filing their insurance. So you have them sign what's called the election to self-pay, which opts them out. It basically says, I'm in the network, you're in the network, all God's children in the network, but I don't want to file my insurance. It's a little more legalese than that, but you get my drift. So they are actually able to opt out of filing their health insurance, which allows you to bill them directly, collect from them at the time of service. The other benefit of that is, or the election to self-pay is, let's say you're taking care of them and then they do go out and they have a health issue. Maybe they got a gallbladder removed and they met their deductible. Well, what do you do then? They just opted out of filing their health insurance, but yet they've got coverage for chiropractic, but they had this $10,000 deductible. What do I do now? How about an election to go back into filing their health insurance? It's called a revocation of election to self-pay. And that is a legal document drawn up by our healthcare attorneys. And so they just opt right back into filing their health insurance, and you can go ahead and bill their health insurance from that point forward. Why are you able to do that? Because the ChiroHealthUSA membership is for non-covered services, or when a patient chooses to opt out of filing their health insurance. At that point, it's basically a non-covered service. They're acting as if they don't even have health insurance. And again, make sure you don't just go willy-nilly and come up with your own language and own form in doing this. Trust me, if you're going to do something like that, absolutely hire a healthcare attorney, or I got an idea, use ours. So that was a 50-minute webinar. We came in under time, which I absolutely love, because if we have the capability, I would love to open it up to questions and answers, Christy. Or questions, maybe. Maybe somebody else has got some answers. Feel free to weigh in.
No, mostly it's like, how do I get a link to the recording? How do I get a copy of these handouts? I did highlight the link to the sample financial policy. So all you have to do is click that link in the chat box. You can also schedule a consult with ChiroHealthUSA. I also posted that. And then Dr. Kurtz, I see your question about where to find the election to self-pay. And
yeah, keep in mind that if you have that election to self-pay, that can only be used with ChiroHealthUSA patients. It has not been approved by any other entity. It's not been approved by the Department of Insurance. If you make up your own, all of these documents are on file with the Departments of Insurance and part of the contractual network discount.
So let's see, what kind of questions do we have? This is a great question. Do non-par Medicare doctors still have to collect the copay?
Never, ever, ever waive a copay or deductible for Medicare patients. That is an inducement, an anti-kickback violation. Being out of network with Medicare doesn't take the Medicare patient out of Medicare, and Medicare has the rules and regulations. And if you're not collecting the cost sharing portions, you will absolutely have a problem.
Hi, Kim said you're missing a slide on the handouts. And yes, we are, because we added that slide after I posted the handout. So give me just a second. I'm going to convert the new PowerPoint to handouts. I was going to add, because when you were talking about the doctor that was offering the free stem, and it showed that he got an $87,000 fine and penalty. And then we give the example of the Aetna request. And I added a note in here to say that was actually a really great deal. He had a really excellent attorney, but in addition to that $87,000, and that entire investigative process lasted around 3 years, but he paid over $250,000 in attorney's fees during that process. But the biggest thing outside of the lower fines and penalties that he received was that he didn't have to admit any type of guilt, which meant that he was not kicked out of any federal health care programs. And Doc, if I'm not mistaken, in most cases in those federal OIG investigations, that is often one of the penalties.
Yeah, and it's not just one of the penalty. It's not the penalty that's levied by the OIG. Here's where that comes from. Every one of you who have filled out a Blue Cross, Aetna, and Cigna application to be in their network has a question, and it says, "Have you ever been deselected or removed from a network, or PPO?" IPA or anything like that? You know why they're asking that? Because if you ever had a fine or a penalty from Medicare, or quite frankly, any other payer, they do not want you in their group. So you may think, well, Medicare is a small part of my practice. So what if I get disbarred from Medicare? You just got opted out, or you just got bumped out of every network that you are in. So it's not just the $80,000, and that's why this doctor was keen on an agreement with them that would not admit guilt, because then he would have to answer yes to those. But the moment you have to answer yes for that, you're toast. If you're involved in third-party reimbursement. Still there, Christy?
I am. Okay. And I was going to add too, and a lot of people just think that they're like, well, I just got kicked out of Medicare, but it is all federal healthcare programs, and there are quite a few. So it's not just extended to Medicare.
Yeah. Try the federal employees Blue Cross Blue Shield. Try U.S. Post Office employees Blue Cross Blue Shield. Any federal insurance, anything that is funded by the federal government and any of their plans, you're done.
Okay. Can you explain again when an election self-pay form would be used for a patient?
You would use, if I have a patient who comes in that's got a $5,000 or a $10,000 deductible, and I'm going over their financial report of findings, and I feel compelled to state this, doctors, we usually do a really good job in our clinical report of findings because we're clinical, we're clinicians. Where we don't always do a good job is in our financial report of findings. And we have the survey data to show it. One of the top reasons that patients drop out of care is over dollars and cents. And it's not just the amount of it, it's the ambiguity of it. They don't know what's expected of them. It's not spelled out in detail for them. So it's kind of like buying one of those timeshares, that guy who's on the radio talking about, you don't have any idea what you bought, when you buy a timeshare. Kind of the same thing with patients. If they don't have financial clarity on their responsibility, then they are likely to drop out of care. Or as the saying goes, when the pain goes, so goes the patient. Well, if you address this up front, you've eliminated one of the top causes of patients dropping out of care. So when I would use the election to self-pay is in a situation where deductible is extremely high, and they're probably not going to meet it in your office because you want to keep their care affordable. If they weren't using the discount medical plan, you would be obligated to charge your actual fees, your higher fees. And if you want to do that, fine. If you don't ever want to discount your fees, don't discount them, but do it across the board. Everybody pays full fare, or if you're going to offer a discount, and quite frankly, if you're part of Blue Cross and Cigna, you're already offering a discount. So don't think, well, I don't do discounts. Well, if you're part of any of those health plans, oh, yes, you do. So use that in a situation with a high deductible, and you explain it to them that because you're not likely to meet the deductible, we have another option. It's called ChiroHealthUSA. You can opt out of filing your health insurance. And it basically is the form that they sign that that states, as I said earlier, I'm in the network, you're in the network, but you as the patient are choosing to opt out of me filing towards to your care. And they're able to do that under the privacy sections of HIPAA.
Well, and I would love one of my favorite benefits of ChiroHealthUSA where you get to charge your usual and customary fees or market value. I think one of the biggest pieces of feedback that we get from the doctors that we work with in the network is that they didn't realize how off their fees were from market value until we showed them some of the resources that were available to them. So it's a strong recommendation, and this is the perfect time of the year, is for you to do an evaluation of your fees, which is something you should do annually. As we all know, inflation is a real thing. Your expenses have gone up. And so you need to be evaluating your fees on an annual basis. One of my favorite websites to look up fair market value is fairhealthconsumer.org, where you can input a code and see what the average is for your zip code. So many doctors that we talk to and work with talk about how they're not being paid the same rates as other healthcare practitioners in their area. Well, if you look at what the average is compared to what you charge, you might see that there's a huge disparity in what we consider our actual fees.
So docs, if you want an almost immediate and guaranteed ways to increase your revenue, let me make a suggestion to you. For those of you that live in a state that have a published workers' comp and PI fee schedule, if you don't have that link on your desktop to where you can pull up and know what that fee schedule is, you should by the close of business today. And the reason that I say that is because we actually did a survey of a large number of our people that had joined our network that were practicing in a state where they had a published workers' comp fee schedule. About 75% of the doctors were not even charging what workers' comp would pay for their evaluation and management codes. About 55% were not even charging what was allowed for x-rays. And another large percent were not even charging what was allowed for therapy and rehab. So if you want a pay increase, at least start charging what these published workers' comp and PI fee schedules are allowing. And, I can't tell you where to set your fees, but I'm not in practice any longer. I did retire from practice. I haven't retired from the profession, obviously. But the reality is, when you're using the discount medical plan, I want to be, quite frankly, I want to have the highest fees that I can. Why? I want to be above what PI and workers' comp charge for two reasons. Number one, because I've got a mechanism to be able to charge those other patients, or excuse me, to be able to collect less from those other patients, I can do so. And so I can get paid well when insurance is available and still keep care affordable for those that don't have that coverage.
I also added our cost of doing business calculator. Critical, because you really need to know what is, not that we ever want you to break even, we want you to be profitable, but you need to know what it is you have to make every single time you walk into a treatment room and make sure you're not getting paid less than that.
So let me share a very common call I used to get, because I've always been involved in our state association and the insurance liaison and Medicare rep and all that crap. Invariably, when a new network would come into the state, my phone rings off the wall. Hey, Ray, are you going to join this network? Number one, don't ever answer that question to someone else, because blackballing a network if they come into the state is an antitrust violation. So you can't do that. You can't collectively say, hey, nobody join Ray's insurance company or whatever it may be. But you got to understand, when they say, well, this happened, Aetna. Medicare, I think at that particular time for a 99 or 98940 was paying, maybe $32. Aetna comes along with a contract and they want to pay $27, paying less than Medicare. And it's like, are you kidding me? You know, number one, Medicare has a most favored nation clause. So what are we doing charging less to Aetna than we are to Medicare? They got a lower rate. And the reality is, they can actually legally do that. Why? Contractual network discount. But here's the bigger issue. Why are these other doctors calling me, asking me, should they join this network? I don't know their finances. I don't know their expenses. I don't know their profit margins. And so unless you know those numbers, how do you make a decision about whether you should join a network? And here's the bottom line. You use this financial calculator or the overhead calculator, and you'll find, for example, it costs you $27.22 to render an adjustment. It's a simple calculation. You look at your collection divided by the number of your patients minus your overhead, and you'll come out with a number. And so if they offer you, if it costs you $22.22 to deliver care, and they offer you a contract for $25, you're losing $2.22 on every single visit. You cannot make that up in volume. It's like the old story I like to tell. It's like buying oranges for a dime, selling them for a nickel, and wondering why you're not making any money. The solution is not to get a bigger truck. The solution is have them start paying you way above and beyond your cost of doing business. And if you don't know that number, you don't know whether you should join the network or not.
I love it. So I went ahead and put in here that whatever your comfort level in communication, we've got you covered. So if you have additional questions watching this recording or later on today, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, does not matter. You can visit us at ChiroHealthUSA.com. Click on live chat to speak to a member of our provider services team. If you like to talk on the phone and want to hear a beautiful Southern accent, you can call 888-719-9990. Or if you just want to send an email over at info@ChiroHealthUSA.com, we are happy to answer your questions regarding specifics of how maybe ChiroHealth USA would work in your practice, answer your compliance questions, whatever you got, shoot it on over to us. We're happy to help. You can also schedule a call using that QR code or one of the links I provided to speak with a member of our team specifically about your questions or concerns with compliance in your office, discounting, and helping your patients. And I also popped in a couple of other links in here. A great article that Dr. Foxworth published a couple of years ago with those same resources on fairhealthconsumer.org. determining your cost of doing business, what information you need when you're trying to determine your fees, including downloading that PI or workers' comp fee schedule. So lots of great resources in here. I hope that you utilize them. Reach out to us if you have any questions, or if you think about it again next week, lose that link, just let me know. We will get right back to you and get you what you need. Dr. Foxworth, any closing comments?
I appreciate all being on the call today, and I hope it was helpful.
I hope you guys have an amazing rest of your day and a fabulous week. And I will see y'all back here on Tuesday for our next exciting webinar, Establishing Your It Factor in Practice, with Dr. Brett Winchester. Super excited about that, our last one of October. 2 weeks later, we're going to talk about finding joy back in your practice and treating your patients with Dr. Jody Dinnerman. And if you've ever heard her speak in person, you know she's got joy oozing from her pores because she has fallen in love with being in practice again, and she's going to share her secrets. So stay tuned for more webinars on the ChiroHealthUSA webinar series. You can look to see what's coming up through the end of the year by clicking this link here. So until Tuesday, y'all have a great day. Bye, y'all.